Hello again, and welcome to Denton's Tales. Now, the Vikings. Ah, yes, the Vikings. Well, everyone knows about the Vikings, right? Oh, they were big, unkempt, hairy brutes in horned helmets who went around 24/7, 365 days a year, raiding, pillaging, burning, looting, and doing unspeakably nasty things to women. Oh, they were the very definition of evil cruelty for its own sake. Hated Christianity. And they were just about the most brutal people who ever brutalized other people anywhere else, anytime in history. Oh, yes, just about everybody knows that. Yes, but you see, there's one little problem with that. It's totally wrong. In fact, it could hardly be any wronger, to coin a word, if it tried. The popular image of the Vikings is rather like some other things from history that are widely believed, but are not necessarily correct. That George Washington, for example, chopped down a cherry tree and admitted to it because he couldn't tell a lie. How noble. That Lord Nelson wore an eye patch. No, he never did. That Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Well, of course, the violin wouldn't be invented for another 1600 years after his time, and even if he'd twanged a lyre, well, he was actually at his villa in Antium, 30 miles away from Rome, when the fire began. Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake." And America did not become independent on the 4th of July, 1776. No. While the Founding Fathers signed the Declaration of Independence on that date, oh yes, independence from England was finally granted on the 3rd of September, 1783. The popular image of the evil, scruffy, rampaging Vikings who did nothing but ravage everywhere, wherever they went, well, that may be added to that list of famous, well-known things that, despite being so well-known, in fact, never actually happened. Now, were the Vikings violent? Well, they were often raiders, obviously. They took what they wanted by force of arms if anyone resisted them. And there has never been a peaceful, non-violent, friendly raid in history by anyone. We have come a long way from Scandinavia. We want all your valuables and your women. Would you mind if we took them? No, not at all, old chap, not at all. Feel free, help yourself. We don't have very many valuables here in the village. The church up there, well, that's got loads of gold and jewels, all sorts of things. You should pop up there, have a chat with them. They're friendly bunch of lads. Well, between you and me, the women here aren't really much to look at. You're welcome to them. Oh, thank you very much. It is very nice to raid you. Any time, old chap, any time. Just drop in whenever you're passing. Toodle pip for now. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. No. Raids by Vikings, or indeed anyone else, were decidedly unfriendly. And all across Europe, various kings, dukes, princes, and so forth were raiding each other's territories, with, of course, a great deal of violence. The Vikings, well, they just did it a bit better. They did it with more finesse, more style, leaping off fearsome-looking dragon-headed ships. They developed the art of raiding to perfection, creating a ferocious image of themselves that terrified other people. From the fury of the Northmen, good Lord deliver us, as the saying was. But their actual savagery itself, it was little different to anyone else at that time. People ended up dead pretty much regardless of who attacked their town or village. I mean, whoever shoves the sword through you and kills you, it really makes very little difference. You are just as dead one way as the other. They never wore helmets with big horns sticking out of them. For that matter, actually, very few men ever wore a helmet at all. But the myth of the horned helmet was created in the 19th century by Richard Wagner and his romanticized Germanic operas. Der Ring des Nibelungen, for example, the Ring of the Nibelungs. Lohengrin, Parsifal, Tannhäuser, and so on. Well, not actually Herr Wagner himself, he just wrote the operas, but rather the theatrical costume designers in the theatres. They thought horned helmets look really good, you know. And the illustrators in the popular press of the time, well, they started drawing any and all old Germanic heroes, Wagner's characters, or genuine historic figures with horned helmets. You know, something like horns sticking out of a helmet, well, it would have made it much easier to knock the helmet off someone's head or to grab it in close combat. Plus, ducking sideways in the shield wall to avoid maybe a spear thrust, well, that might have meant that Bjorn standing beside you now has a horn stuck in his ear. But a horned helmet became the most obvious, though totally incorrect, symbol of a Viking. Horned helmet equals Viking. How ironic that they became so famous for something they never wore. Scruffy, unkempt? Well, the Vikings were actually the cleanest people of their day, washing their hands and faces daily and bathing every week, the day that we call Saturday, being Lorgada, the bath day. This absolutely astonished the Anglo-Saxons, who might only have a bath occasionally, like the annual bath. Maybe two if they were really clean freaks. And Anglo-Saxon women are actually recorded as going off with Norse men because of their greater cleanliness. You know, there are complaints about that in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It says a great deal about Anglo-Saxon men. Hair care was very important to the Old Norse. They were very well groomed, men and women. They took great care of their appearance as well. So unkept brutes they were not. Now, they might kill you, yes, but they'd be nice and clean and fresh, well-groomed and manicured, and probably smelled lovely while they did it. I'm sure that was a great comfort. Raiding, pillaging, and looting. Yes, they did all that. As I've said, they were violent when they did it, but so was everyone else when they did the same thing at that time. But you see, raiding, this is always stressed. Every TV show, every documentary, Viking raiders, attacking monasteries, etc., etc. But raiding was only a part of what they did when they set out in their ships. And ships, in fact, were what made them Vikings in the first place. And I'll be doing some videos shortly specifically about the Viking longship. Because the word Viking, or Vikinger, as it was in Old Norse, was a ship-specific term. And it only applied to those going off in a ship, farjagivikar, to go Viking. The term meant someone doing something in a ship, and it could be seen as, well, being a pirate, an adventurer, a seafarer. The term was a bit vague. It didn't really have a strict meaning, but it related very specifically to seaborne activities, and it could be applied to anyone doing anything if they went somewhere and they did it in a ship. Overseas trading, going off to found new settlements, exploring, and so on. But the term Viking did not apply to those who stayed home. People tending their farms, woodworking, craftsmen and women making utensils or jewelry. Anyone who did something without leaving Scandinavia was not a Viking. They were a Norwegian, a Dane, or a Swede. But Viking came to be used in more recent times to mean anyone or anything from Scandinavia in those times. But it didn't. Things like art, architecture, clothing, religion, and so on were Scandinavian or Norse, not Viking. And no one called them Vikings in their own times. They didn't even call themselves Vikings, other than in that very narrow definition of the word as seafarers. And if you'd come running into a village in Ireland in the 9th century, shouting, "The Vikings are coming!" well, nobody would have known what you were talking about. They might have thought this was some sort of traveling show that was coming. But if you'd said, "The Northmen are coming," everybody would have scattered like cockroaches when you switched the light on. The word Viking didn't come into general use in the English language for 1,000 years after the so-called Viking Age. Sir Walter Scott was one of the first to use it. And here's the thing, there was no such thing as a Viking ship. Now, I mean, you see this, and most people would say, there you go, Viking ship. But no, their ships were just that, ships. Ships that some men, and occasionally women, were using to go Viking. And of course, when they got off the ships, well, they were just Norwegians, Danes, or Swedes once again. Their Vikingness, well, that was left in the ship. You know, and the Norse did so much more than raiding when they went Viking. They were the greatest travellers of their age, reaching lands that stretched from the Middle East to North America and everywhere in between. Their trading was extensive, bringing hard-to-get things from the north, such as amber and furs, as well as excellent metalwork, and trading or selling it in the markets of Europe and the Middle East, especially Constantinople, capital of the mighty Byzantine Empire. And they even reached Baghdad. They established settlements in Britain, in France, in what would become Russia and the Ukraine, in Iceland, Greenland, and temporarily in Newfoundland and New Brunswick, in what is now Canada. They founded most of the major towns here in Ireland, not the native Irish, including the capital, Dublin, or Difflin, as they called it. And they were very tolerant of other peoples who they settled among. Intermarriage with the Irish, for example, was a very, very common thing, and it began quite quickly after their arrival. And they began to convert quite easily to Christianity, a faith that we are told, well, that they were supposed to hate. Another Viking myth. Yes, they raided churches and monasteries, but not because they hated the Christian faith as such, but because in those days most of the wealth was in the hands of the church. Viking raiders went to where the money was. You know, like a bank robber today who wants a lot of money. Well, he doesn't raid the corner shop where they sell cigarettes and sweets and newspapers. He goes to the bank where they have the money. So there we leave this short overview of the Vikings, much maligned by history and so often seen incorrectly as a nationality. The term Viking is used almost as indicating a nationality, rather than what it actually was and what they actually were, Scandinavian people who went Viking. And their legacy in our own time is immense. I mean, over 50 words in the English language are Old Norse, many in Irish too. Cities all across Europe founded by them. Dublin, Limerick, Waterford, Wexford, and others here in Ireland. Novgorod and Kiev, and Russia and Belarus take their names from the Norse who settled there, from the word Rus, which meant one who rowed a boat. The Old Norse were a great deal more than a bunch of rampaging raiders bent on wholesale slaughter and destruction. And without them, Europe would be a different place today. No one other than the Roman Empire having had such a universal impact on all aspects of society. So, with that, we come to the end of that little discussion. I will say for now, farewell, and see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye for now.